couple more minutes until.
We're missing Maddie. I don't know if Maddie's coming in.
I know Simran and Fern are not making, or cannot make it, but.
Oh.
But
But Daisy, please have a seat. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I haven't seen Kathy in a while, but I wasn't here last week, and I missed a few meetings in
Gotcha.
February. Yeah.
How are you doing, Daisy?
Good, just running around. Yeah.
Is
Sure,
it
it's a
fun?
busy day for you.
The best part to me is actually, except for like the running around, like the tight like schedule crunch, but the best part for me is meeting with the student groups. It's much better than like the whole like laying out like strategy and like stuff like that. Like that's kind of like sometimes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Very good.
I'm just sending out the Hangout link, because some people said they would join in. My friend, but, yeah. How are you guys doing? How's this last week before break looking for everyone?
I don't think I've met you. Hi, I'm Logan.
Logan.
Yes,
Okay.
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Are you on the disability line?
Yes.
Okay.
I've been really busy. I haven't been able to come to some meetings, but I just joined exec as the.
So, yeah, okay.
Oh, Kevin, were you not at the meeting when we introduced our new exec members?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
So Simran joined exec. And so did Logan.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, cool.
And what position did Simran take? The advocacy chair?
I think that's Logan,
Oh.
and then Simran is accessibility.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. So I think we'll be swapping handles a lot.
Alright, everyone, so thank you so much for coming to today's meeting. I know this last week leading up to spring break is a busy time for everyone, but
Actually, some people.
yeah, we have the DSG presidential candidates today, and welcome Daisy. Thank you so much for joining us and making DA a priority of sharing with us. We're really lucky to have you here. So why don't you just take it away?
I'm lucky to be here speaking with you all. I'm gonna start off by introducing myself and talking a little bit about my involvement with DSG, kind of like how that started, because I think that's really important in how I view DSG and how I view the role of the presidency, and then touch a little bit on my platform, and I'll be happy to answer like specific questions that you might have. So my name is Daisy Almonte. I'm a junior from a small town southeast of here called Turkey. And it's like we have 300 people in like one gas station. So despite the fact that I like grew up so close to the Triangle, I had no idea that these universities existed. I found out that Duke was a thing and that it existed and that it was a university in 7th grade, and it wasn't until like January, right before like the deadline or like spring winter break of my senior year, that I decided to apply because a college advisor from the Duke College Advising Corps motivated me to do that. And so my journey to Duke has been no straight line, and neither was my journey to DSG. My involvement with DSG actually starts fall 2016. I was a first year freshman, and the presidential election had just happened. Even though I was safe, was worried about the fate of a lot of my undocumented peers and my undocumented friends and family members. We were worried about whether DACA recipients would be persecuted or whether they would be allowed to continue their education. So even though I had no involvement with DSG, I teamed up with the president of Mi Gente, a grad student studying immigration policy, and a senator in DSG to take a resolution to the DSG Senate asking them to asking the administration to protect our undocumented individuals on campus. And as a first generation college student, I was afraid to speak up in class, so you can imagine how scared I was to speak up in Senate in that auditorium style building. But I did so anyways because my fear and my concern for my community far outweighed any of the reservations that I had about my ability to speak to that Senate. So I spoke to them with my heart in my hands, with urgency and fear in my voice, wanting them to understand that as a student and them as my student representatives, I needed them to take action on something that me and my community were fearful about. But when I looked at the faces that I was speaking to and I saw them staring back at me, I felt that they weren't understanding the fear and urgency that I was trying to convey, and that they weren't understanding why this resolution meant so much to me. And it was that night that I realized the power that a representative body can have, but also why it's so important that a representative body be accessible in the fullest sense of the term. And it's with that experience in mind, the experience of that night, that I decided to join DSG as an at-large senator my following year, my sophomore year. And it's with that experience in mind that I set out to research and draft a resolution last semester calling on the administration to develop a policy on hate and bias. Because I remembered how it felt to be scared, to be fearful, and to want my student representatives to take action on that. And so as a vice president on the inside of this representative body, I decided that I was not in a position where I could take action on fear that many communities were feeling because of these acts of hate and bias. And I made sure to include in that resolution that such a policy should be created in collaboration with activists like People State that have been calling on it for months, but also take into consideration the fact that students have been calling for this even before we got here. And I'd like to emphasize that when I say that I prioritize student voices, I think that's a good example, but also the fact that I made sure to take that resolution even to advocates of free speech who are afraid that a hate and bias policy would kind of like step on their rights to free speech. I made sure to have a discussion with students who felt that way, who felt that such a policy would step on their rights. And I think that my commitment to elevating those voices, recognizing that students have been calling on these things, shows that I'm aware of the fact that it's not a matter of whether students have a voice, but it's a matter of students having their voices be heard, because every single student faces a unique experience at Duke, and students who face different issues and different obstacles throughout their journey here are the experts on those issues and on those problems, and therefore they should be present at the decision-making tables or in spaces whenever decisions about those issues are being debated. And I think that's where the role of GSU president comes in. So as GSU president, your biggest and most unique tool is not necessarily the ability to pursue project work, but rather the ability to get invited into closed-door meetings with top-level administrators year-round as the representative of the student body. So when the student body is electing a GSU president, you're electing who you want in those meetings. Who do you want to send into those meetings? And I think that I'm qualified to be that person, honestly, the best candidate to be in those meetings, because my leadership is grounded in the experiences of students who are not typically represented in DSG politics or university politics. Because right now, information about policy changes is restricted to administration, and then that kind of like special circle of students who are heavily involved in university politics, heavily involved in DSG. And I think that it's time that we bring in input from all students, regardless of how affiliated they are with those politics, and even regardless of how affiliated they are with identity groups. And not only that, but turn that representation back into a two-way street where I take back and all students can hear back, one, the fact that these meetings about policy decisions are actually taking place, and two, what's going down in those meetings. I have very specific, concrete ideas about how I would go about implementing that. For example, the fact that these meetings are happening and what's going on in those meetings to students. It's simple. As president, you have access to a university-wide listserv, which we forget, I think, the power of that tool, because it's kind of become something seen as irrelevant by students, where it's an attempt to make, like dad jokes and kind of like inform students on things that they might not exactly be interested in. I think that it's important to inform students about what's going on campus and senator projects and that project work. But I think it's more important for students to be aware of the fact that the DSU president is attending all these different sorts of meetings on several issues that are so very important to students and on several issues that students are experts on. So I would change the structure of the GSU blast and make sure that I say, on Monday, I'm going to meet with Kate Wetton at 9:45 in whatever building to talk about draft number 2 of the hate and bias policy, which just bounced back from legal last week. Or on Thursday, we're going to talk about financial aid policy, and these are the specific points of contention that are going to be discussed in that meeting. And as far as making sure that student input is represented at the very beginning of these decisions, I plan to institute mechanisms by which that can happen, so that we're not reliant on the character of one specific person in leadership roles to invite students in. For example, I know that Duke Disability Alliance was invited to go speak on the working group for community and dialogue last week, and that was because students brought that up as something that should be heard. We should hear from DDA. And I think that that's great, but I think we should have mechanisms and structures in place by which that has to happen, regardless of who's in these leadership positions. So one way that I plan on doing that is establishing advisory committees made up of students that are an integral and non-excludable part of any decision-making process. So with financial aid, for example, having students who are financial aid recipients be an integral part of any decision that affects financial aid policy changes. And then another structure that I plan on pursuing is a comment period, much like we have at the federal level, where every single time that there's a decision rolled out by the university, there's a public comment period by which all students online could submit comments on how that decision would impact them. And the university would have to sift through each unique comment, each unique concern, and respond to them before moving forward with anything. And this would be particularly useful in the upcoming report that will be issued by the Next Generation Living and Learning Task Force. They're tasked with rethinking undergraduate housing for the next decade and giving advice to President Price on how to proceed. So I think that when that report comes out in May, before President Price even moves forward with anything, we should have a comment period where all students can submit how the proposals will affect them or what's missing from those proposals. I can go more into depth, but I feel like I've talked enough. I'm happy to take any questions.
So just kind of thank you, Daisy, for everything, and just if you could touch on the questions that what work you've done for our students.
So I've been a strong advocate throughout for my work in DSU for the representation of identity and cultural groups on campus. I understand that GGA has been working to kind of foster that sort of community building element that we don't have access to right now. There's a lot of groups that don't have access to spaces, but there's a lot of groups that have been fortunate enough, for example, me, I'm fortunate enough that through the work of activists, we've been given La Casa. But I think that in my advocacy for every single group to have spaces available to them and to the strength and identities that different groups represent, I've been sort of elevating kind of the concerns of GDA and not having that sort of space for them. And I've also worked with financial aid to kind of include the range of financial aid services that are provided, sort of these hidden costs. I know that as a first generation low income student, sometimes even though I have a full ride scholarship, costs of books and different things like that aren't included. And as such, I understand that there's oftentimes costs that come along with having to acquire medication or having to acquire different things that aren't covered by financial aid that should be covered because they affect a student's ability to enjoy their Duke experience. I'm not in the business of co-opting projects that aren't mine, so I'm not going to say that I've been involved in projects specifically working with DDA, but I've made sure that in my time of DSG in equity and outreach, I've always known that there's been someone working alongside DDA, and especially with Ivan Robles. I've always been in conversation with him about the work he's doing and asked him to keep me updated on kind of what's going on. So that's the extent of how I feel that I've been contributing to the efforts of DDA in the past. And then for going forward, I think that I kind of outlined the way that I plan to implement these mechanisms and structures by which DDA and several other groups would be greatly benefited. I'm not an expert on what it means to be at Duke and feel that physical or mental disability is impacting my ability to succeed here, but I know that students who do face those struggles are the experts, and I'm committed to making sure that you could take advantage of the structures that I plan to put in place to make sure that your voice, not mine, is included at those decision-making spaces.
Thank you, Lizzie.
Thank you. Is there anything else?
Just if you get some ribbon as you're heading out.
Thank you so much. And if you ever have any other questions or want more clarification, please reach out because the conversation doesn't stop here. I'm happy to answer anything else that you might think of. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks
Daisy.
so much for sharing. What is Ivan? Are you still in touch with him?
Yeah, he's a good friend of mine. He's good. He's smart.
He's smart,
He's
yeah.
smart.
Who was that? Yeah.
He's been doing a few things with the indoor accessibility.
Oh,
How are you? This room is lovely. This is such a nice venue. Should I sit here?
Yeah, please. Feel comfortable. I'm DT.
Nice to meet you in
Nice to
person.
meet you.
I'm Liv. Thank you for having me. Did you want me to dive into the spiel, answer the questions first? What are we thinking?
Go right into your spiel. Take
Go
it.
ahead. Okay. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for having me. My name is Liv McKinney. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm a junior from Columbus, Ohio, studying biology, chemistry, and medical sociology. And when I'm not busy debating whether or not I'm pre-med, which I really should have figured out, especially since I'm studying those things, I'm a member of the FACT board program here. I'm part of the Vast Connections team looking at how to make cervical cancer screening more accessible in rural areas. And I'm a server at the Commons, right upstairs. Come check us out. We just got lobster. And for the past 3 years, I've served on the Services and Sustainability Committee of DSG, the first two as a senator and this past year as VP. And I'm super excited to be running for DSG president this year. I'm really running because I want to make Duke more inclusive and accessible for all students. A little bit of background on me. When I first came to campus, neither of my parents had stable jobs, and I was very nervous about how money would shape my experiences here. I only share this with you because I quickly found out that it was not easy to manage life or manage affording Duke here without a super high income. And what opened my eyes the most was realizing how many students had it worse than me in that regard and trying to picture their experiences. So that realization that Duke was not designed with every student in mind is really what inspired me to join DSG my first year. And since joining, I've tried to make the lives of students easier through my project work. That's been things like last year working with student health and Duke stores to get wellness products and medications, including Plan B in the vending machines here. Also working this past year on the Food for Fines project to allow students to donate canned goods to pay off their parking fines before they hit their Versa account. You can buy those on Food Points, which was sick. I paid off like 3 tickets, so that was nice because I sadly had too many. And then most recently working to negotiate with administration to change the first year meal plan from 500 to 800 food points, guaranteeing 3 meals a day for the first time since that plan's creation, which took way too long. Let me tell you that I've been working on that since my first year. But a lot of my advocacy and project work has centered around putting students first, and if I were to be elected as DSG president, that's exactly what I would continue to prioritize and do. To start, I'll go to the platform real quick. One, I want to expand accessibility on this campus. This is both financial and physical. I think for financial accessibility, Duke has tons of hidden costs that they are not transparent about and then really blindside students with by not providing support. This is things like course costs, laundry, even summer storage options. We really just don't, one, prepare students that they'll have to pay those or give them any resources to help or at least connect them to those resources actively. So that's something I want to change. For physical accessibility, I really do think facilities has the budget and has in the past worked to create a revolving fund to improve buildings' efficiency measures. And I think that can similarly be implemented for physical accessibility measures, if not coupled with sustainability efforts, since they are making money on those changes. I think it's unacceptable that Duke pats itself on the back for making new buildings more accessible and then leaving older buildings just completely in the dust and really not even trying to work with students to change those. I think a big part of that project could be implementing student feedback to hear about what buildings need the most work in regards to opening doors, ramps, just a lot of door width even. I just think facilities is very detached from that issue and could be better connected to students that way. Additionally, I really want to hold Duke accountable to both its students and its greater community. I could go on for a really long time about how we could do this better, but with projects including expanding ban the box efforts, looking at our sexual assault policy and our apathy surrounding that, I think those are 2 big ones. I also think looking at acts of hate and bias on our campus and really uplifting communities that are affected by that to be actively involved in that policy discussion, I think is very important. I don't think enough students are being consulted on that currently, and it's going to be an ineffective policy if they don't change that soon. I also think working with the provost office to require racial and gender bias training for faculty is huge and has proved to be a big issue this past month. And then finally, I think looking at reimagining student life on our campus, with everyone moving to West next year, I think there are really exciting opportunities for expanding sustainability measures across campus, looking at how to bridge some students' concerns with admin, because I do think there are some logistical issues they haven't worked out about this new West campus, and with the new Hollows dorm being so far. And then finally, looking at mental health culture on Duke's campus, I think there are a lot of improvements that can be made on shifting our culture around that. And by implementing more a-week programming surrounding introducing CAPS counselors or introducing resources early, that could help eliminate some of that stigma around seeking help. So as I said before, I don't think Duke was designed with all students in mind, but I think a big part of DSG's role is to rework some of the foundations of our university around equity, access, and inclusion. And as DSG president, I really want to make it my goal to work with every single student group and every student that has an opinion to how to better make this campus work for all students. So if you have any questions, I would love to hear them, yes. I know that was a lot, I just didn't
No,
want to
that's great. I liked what you said about the faculty trainings for racial and gender sensitivity. Would you consider also including in your platform just like disability accessibility in the faculty trainings too?
Oh, for sure.
As a faculty member, I know that we don't get trained in how to implement accommodations. It's never part of the conversation. It's like when you're new faculty, usually your department handles it, and most departments don't discuss that or cover that. And sometimes like you go to like the new faculty fair, and it's like there's a booth run by SDAO, but there's no like presentation that everybody has to go to. There's like nothing. So that's a really big problem, and I think students have a lot of trouble getting their accommodations and just kind of like having their professors understand and not view them with suspicion because like, oh, I don't see your disability, or like, I don't,
Completely.
You know.
I think that's a super amazing point. I know racial and gender bias trainings already exist. I'm not sure what's already there for accessibility, but I think working to implement that in the same regards is really important. I think it's just absolutely unacceptable that our faculty get hired or get tenure and then never are accountable to anyone ever again. Because I think that's clearly shown to be a problem. And I also think that is such a good point about, I've heard a lot of complaints, I'm sure you could speak more on behalf of this, about some of the ways professors handle test accommodations, that they're very not standardized. A lot of students don't have access to a professor in the actual room during that, and I think that's a huge problem. So one, standardizing those accommodations, but also requiring faculty to go through that training, I think is so important and a great point.
And you can talk to Lee Figling about it, who's in charge of SDAO. She does really great presentations like at the Advisor Academy, but they're like, you choose to go to it.
Exactly.
You know, and I think that for like just when you're a new faculty, she has like a booth, but they don't like incorporate her more in the sort of overall program, so.
Yeah, and I think
She might
when
have
faculty are the ones choosing to go to that, usually the ones who choose to go aren't the ones who
And there's
need
like
it.
5 of us in the room, and we're like, yeah, so.
Exactly, yeah. Great point, thank you for that, yeah, definitely.
Also, everyone should know, before Lagoon launched her platform, she reached out to DDA asking to speak about like what DDA would think on certain things about the revolving door policy, and we had a great phone conversation. So I just wanted to inform you all of that.
Yeah, that was so helpful. I think with the questions you emailed beforehand, I think one thing that I have been able to work on in terms of accessibility actually wasn't on DSG through Fact Board. We do the intersectionality discussion at the beginning of the year, and I was on the working group to redesign some of that conversation, and we were able to include ability status as an identity sphere this year, which I think was really important, expanding that discussion for first year students, because although racial identity is very important and what it had focused on in the past, being able to get definitions from the CSGD, from relative student groups about gender, sexuality, religion, ability status, I think really helped strengthen that conversation. In terms of DSG past work, I have not been able to work on many projects surrounding physical accessibility. I've focused a lot on financial accessibility, but that is, I think it's so important and there's so much room for improvement. So I really did want to make it a central part of my platform, which is why I reached out. And I'm so glad we could talk, because I think there's a lot of things you guys are working on, including the physical space for DDA on campus that I think is so important, and I really do want to help connect you to administrators in that regard. Yeah, any other questions, anything else you're working on?
I think we're doing some issues on like accessibility maps and like creating maps
Oh, yeah.
so that people can know where are the accessible routes and how can they go through them.
That's awesome.
navigate campus best ahead of time.
There's also people working on getting American Sign Language,
Yes, I've heard about that.
so curricular stuff, yeah,
That's so cool.
and getting a disability studies certificate program.
That's awesome. Definitely. I think this is a really exciting time for that because I know so many conversations about curriculum are coming up. So I think it's
You're
really
on Bass Connections, which I think a lot of people involved in that Bass Connections are part of that conversation
Oh,
too.
cool. Yes. There's tons of awesome Bass teams. I've been really involved in mine. It's been like one of my best experiences here. But for the maps, just where are you imagining those going? Like on the Central Duke app, or like where do you envision?
So I think the main two things we're working on now are one, having tactile maps for people who are low vision.
Okay.
In spaces like West Union. Our main space we're looking at right now is West Union for
Okay.
proof of concept, but so having tactile maps for people who are low vision so they can figure out how to get around, and then also integrating that with technology like an app that would help people navigate in real time. And also something that would help admin, the people who are managing construction, determine whether certain layouts are more accessible than others, and try and help them get to solutions that are accessible. So we're exploring ideas in those spaces right now. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think West Union's a very visible, like awesome central place to have those that I think will bring a lot of awareness, but also like be very helpful in that regard. And I think also the construction project is so important because, like I said, I just think facilities is very out of touch from these issues. So having that student feedback would be super helpful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for helping me. It was so nice meeting you. If you have any other questions, please reach out. I'll be on Facebook like way too much during this week. Goodbye. Thank you.
So our last candidate, Khalil, is not able to join us in person, but I did have him send a video talking about his platform and his work with disability. So I just want to play that for you all.
How long is the video?
Huh?
How long is the video?
It's like 5 minutes total for both videos. I will.
Two videos?
You sent two?
Yeah, one about his platform, one about disability.
So.
Screen share.
Will it play through the speakers?
Oh,
Or will it?
Yeah.
Try it out.
There are many clubs like that.
Yeah, what is it?
They're called fraternities.
Oh.
Friends have meetings in West Union?
I don't know, it looks like a frat.
alright,
They're all
Don't
mostly
we have,
white,
like-
they're large.
Don't they all like live together?
can you guys see the screen?
Yes.
You want to try switching it to this for like audio? For audio settings.
So wait, is all we're doing today talking about these three candidates?
We have time allotted for we have time allotted for the endorsement decisions and then the task force updates. So
Alright. If you can't hear or see, please let me know. Sorry, we don't have a
Everyone,
screen.
thank you so much for having me on. I'm super sorry I couldn't be there. Regardless, I'm extremely excited to talk to y'all. My name is Sahil Tadavadia, and I'm running to be your next BSG president. I served 2 years as a senator, and this year as a vice president of academic affairs. I come from a long line of storytellers. My grandfather shared with me the knowledge of the past, making sure that I never forgot our centuries-old roots as farmers and how we served on the village committee. My father shared with me the knowledge of the present, how we installed water pumps and served meals in schools. Each summer, when I visited our rural village in India, I lived these stories, building upon my idyllic picture that I remember. Mounds of barley and millet on our village porch, and children dancing in the first monsoon rains. However, as I grew older, that idyllic picture quickly melted away. The hushed whisper of a family friend committing suicide due to farmer debt. The frightened confession of an older cousin as she prepared for harassment on her daily trip to access water. As I listened more carefully, I heard untold stories of poverty, lack of dignity, and fear. As a result, following the same footsteps of my family in service to their village, I've continuously strived to share these untold stories, regardless of where I am. Duke is no different. Each and every single one of us has a narrative. What brought us here, what we do here, where we want to be. Where I think this institution has failed us is in supporting these narratives, regardless of what they are and what they may imply. To that end, I have created from scratch a one-to-one peer mentorship program for all incoming students of the class of 2023. Each and every single first year, from this point onwards, will have access to a peer mentor before the school year even begins. I have developed and received access for a platform to collect student narratives regarding classroom incidents of hate and bias. I played a critical role in the transformation from the STEM form to the incapacitation form, making mental health a legitimate and valid reason to miss academic activities. Time and time again, I have ideated, learned, and executed in service of the student body. Each and every single aspect of my vision is an extension of things that I've already done, things that I've already executed upon. I believe in a Duke that is our home, where each student is empowered to define their own trajectory. The core driving force behind my candidacy are three simple words that hold a lot of meaning to me: access, community, transformation. I will democratize access to opportunity for all students by restructuring advising, building upon my previous experiences to do so. I will foster a community and a new academic culture by expanding a peer mentorship program so that no student feels as though their lack of networks precludes them from success. I've already created a platform for students to explicitly name and describe incidents of hate and bias, and next year, I will amplify those voices to administration to hold them accountable beyond faculty trainings that have proven to be ineffective. Finally, I will transform this campus by enabling DSG to be what it was always meant to be: a forum where students can organize, consolidate, and unite in common cause. Our time at Duke has been characterized by loss, anger, fear, sadness, joy, happiness, defeat, triumph. Amongst all these things, if Duke really is our home, it's high time we redecorate. Thank you. Last year, in my message to you all, I said that as vice president, I would break from the traditional role of academic affairs as a committee focused solely on bettering academic resources. I promised that I would take a holistic approach and explicitly establish a connection between academic life at Duke and the amplification of student voices and identity groups. To the best of my ability, I've kept that promise. I spent my time as VP working with my senators to expand the purview of our committee. As I mentioned earlier, we played a critical role in redesigning the STIF to explicitly allow for mental health as a legitimate and valid reason to miss academic activities. We're working directly with the DUS Advisory Board to mandate faculty to keep a student's initial request for special needs or accommodation on private personal record so that the student does not have to be burdened with asking for accommodation again and again over the course of the semester. And particularly significantly, it was academic affairs that took the initiative to work on the indoor physical accessibility project with DDA. In regards to your second question, hate and bias are not only experienced by students of color, but also students from all identity groups and ability statuses. And I believe that by directly exposing administration to these experiences, progress can be made. The second part of my vision is centered around my belief that DSU should not only be an advocate for students, but a space for students to advocate. I plan to launch a series of town hall style forums where students can come together to be briefed on issues and consolidate their collective power in a way that explicitly joins student voices with DSU's institutional connections more powerfully than resolutions or other symbolic acts. The physical accessibility of campuses, the visual and auditory accessibility of campus marketing, and hate and bias advocacy are three barriers for students with disabilities that I'd love to work with DDA on. Thank you for your time.
So these were our DSG candidates. Any initial thoughts?
So is this endorsement decision time?
Yes, it is. We are not going to gather outside of this room and
But that was so fun.
I know, we gotta respect people's time and
Time, schmine.
All right. Well, do we just want to go in order of the candidates and say our opinions and, you know, compliments or maybe reservations?
Also, Benisha and Fern have joined us through a Google Hangout. I'm sorry guys, I didn't check and ask if you could hear everything properly, but if you please feel free to speak up at any point. We want everyone's voices to be heard.
Cool. So starting with Daisy.
Want to recap on like everyone's?
I like Daisy. She's cool.
So,
I don't know any of them.
yeah, if you wanted to pick somebody like Trey, that would be Daisy. If you wanted to pick somebody like Luke, that would be Liv. So I think,
Who's Sunny almost like?
what?
Who's
Sunny.
almost like?
I'm not really sure.
He's like the Brian Burr of the group.
Well, because I think just based on our dilemma last time as to who to pick, I think that's what I saw.
Why do you think, sorry to be like devil's advocate, but like, can you explain why you associate Daisy with someone like Trey, who, if, for people who missed our discussion last time, Trey really, we felt that he personally was invested in the issues which DDA was pushing for, and therefore we thought that we could put our trust into him to really elevate our issues to the Board of Trustees. Whereas Luke Farrell, he's worked with us before through SOFC, and he's shown that he will work with us practically, like in a practical concrete setting, and that am I missing something?
As far as I saw it, it was like the activist pushing from the outside versus the like well-connected bureaucrat from the inside.
Right, yeah,
It was, like,
Luke was more well
to
connected.
generalize a lot.
So you see Liv as being more of an insider bureaucratic?
So I think definitely when you look at Liv's, what Liv said to us, I think she definitely had a lot more specific stuff that was connected to disability, which means she's done the research and she's done the thinking. Even if perhaps some of it ends up being posturing, like at least she had that, like, I think Daisy has been connected with people's state and she's done more of the activist stuff and she's not afraid to take these extremely controversial positions and speak up for what's right. So I think that's more of the dichotomy you have. Again, the insider versus outsider. I think the difference in this case is that we don't have, like, none of them have worked with us in a very direct sense at all, none of these three candidates. So I think that is one difference, definitely.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would actually use the comparison of Luke and Trey because they're all in DSG and all have been in DSG for a long time.
That is true.
So
Including Sahil.
Yep.
Yeah, was he 2 years as VP?
yeah, now it's his third year. So I mean, I liked them all. I think Liv talked a little bit like more like effectively about disability issues, but I also felt like the way she like presented it was like, these are the issues I identify and I'll work with student groups, including DDA, to address them. And it's like, what does that work with group X look like? Right, so it's like one thing to identify the issue, it's another thing to say, here's how I'm going to work with DDA to address that issue, rather than just say you're gonna do that. And I think Daisy, on the other hand, didn't do as great of a job at talking about disability issues really in a nuanced way, but did talk about the very nuanced way of how she's gonna work with DDA and like bring us to the table. So like that was how I saw the two in conversation with one another.
I think that's definitely good.
Daisy did say she was gonna create something like an advisory committee for specific issues and have students who are more informed on the issues on these committees, so that they can inform her and administrators about what's the appropriate actions to take or like what they want to see. I think what was the mechanism that Liv was talking about? I feel like I don't know if she said anything specific about like a specific mechanism or structure that we could work through, and you know.
When we talked over the phone, she called me and asked about like the revolving door fund, which I don't think she went into as much detail at this meeting. And I'm not trying to add more detail about her thoughts in the way that I gave her my presentation, but like also being pointing out that I think what she meant was that kind of the funds that facilities has, or the money that Duke has in general, kind of how it allots money to make buildings more sustainable, environmentally friendly. In the same respect, kind of making buildings more what's it called? Accessible. And I told her like automatic automatic door openers cost $20,000 a piece, and like that's why the conversation shuts down. Like, do you really think that facility hasn't like the money to actually allocate for it? And she said, yeah, I think it does. I will say for Sahil as well that he talked. I don't know if like everyone could hear it in the video, but he talked about how he's worked in his committee for classroom accommodations, which I thought was unique. And I think he didn't hash it out as much as Daisy, but he did speak on like town hall style forums that join like student groups and DSG's institutional powers. So kind of like.
Yeah, I did like how Sahil seemed very informed and like, he's acted upon his, he's shown that he's acted upon his ideas on accessibility because he like redesigned STEM to include mental health issues of valid reasons. And then I think I didn't hear exactly what he said about asking for classroom accommodations repeatedly or something. Like, he made it easier to do that again, and it like
So you have to go to each professor maybe?
Yeah, something like making it easier to get classroom accommodations
Yeah.
if you know that you will need it multiple times.
I'd love to get clarification on that because I haven't seen any change for me personally. So I don't know if anyone,
Oh wait, he said that's something he already did, or wasn't he saying that was something he was going to do?
Oh,
He said that he's been working on so that if like a student goes up to a professor and says, I need these accommodations, the professor has to make a personal note for him or herself, and that way it's like the student doesn't have to keep reminding him or I need these accommodations.
I see.
So it's like, and that way the professor can say, oh, you didn't tell me about this. But again, I don't know how much that's gonna be.
Yeah, we could have asked him a follow-up if he was here, but
because like you send your professor a letter and that's already something that they have to keep on file. They
Yeah.
know about.
we're not supposed to demand students to remind us all this. Like, we're supposed to
that would be outrageous.
do it all semester, once we know. I thought what he was saying was that, we would make
For,
some
like, the
kind of
cross
system
classes.
whereby students wouldn't have to approach individual professors across their career, but
What would be nice is that if you didn't have to request a new letter each semester for the exact same list of accommodations.
Right.
So that
from
would,
SDAO itself.
yeah, so that would cut out the one email and would cut out some of the lead time for that.
Yeah.
So just emailing all your professors at once, or like sending that letter.
Or just that you
Or
have that
basically,
letter
yeah.
for the course of your 4 years.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you have to do that every semester.
Yeah, you have to email every single professor every semester. So if you didn't have to get a letter from them, it would at least save a couple days in terms of you can meet with your professors sooner.
Can we close this?
The windows are cold. No wonder it's been cold.
I was like, this is way too cool. Oh my god, it won't close.
Careful, Simon.
It's okay, I followed for more spots.
They're all open.
So does anyone have like a preference for the three? I mean, I'm gonna officially recuse myself as a faculty member, but.
Why don't you unofficially recuse that kid?
Yeah,
I like Daisy and Sahil the most. I don't really have an opinion between the two. I think it's so hard to compare the two because like we didn't get to ask him questions and we lost all of like the emotional appeal that is brought in with. So like I don't even want to really weigh on whether or not I like him more than her. But I thought they were both great.
Okay.
I also liked Liv a lot, but
I am in favor of Sahil and Liv a little bit more than Liv.
I really thought Daisy was really well spoken, and I think she really did a good job presenting her plan, but I think that she didn't really answer the questions really clearly that we asked. And I think that Sahil and Liv did a better job addressing our specific questions that we had posed to them.
Can I say something
Yeah.
about that? I think that as in the position of DSU president, I feel like it's practical knowledge or like ability to practically implement something is, I don't know if it's more important than with young trustee, but like, I don't know, maybe because they have the power to like shift the structure of DSG, right? So maybe that's why I felt that Sahil and Liv, who showed that they were more like, they seemed to have a practical plan in place when they thought about our issues. that might be more valuable in this position. Sorry, I didn't like say that very clearly, but that's why I thought, and I think that Logan was mentioning.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was.
Yeah, I would also agree with Liv and Sahil too, because it seems like they're a little more grounded in like experience and like knowledge about the issues, which as you said, like being able to practically implement that.
What do all three of them do in DSG? So one is academic affairs, who's that? Sahil, and then the other two do what?
Live is services,
sustainability.
equity, and outreach.
Okay, yeah, I'd expect a little bit more for equity and outreach than what we heard.
Yeah, I think that, so one thing that I've been thinking about is, I know Daisy especially talked about including the voices of affected students more in administration's decisions, and getting more feedback from affected students. But I think another concern is the fact that shouldn't elected officials already be knowledgeable about some of the main issues concerning minority groups like people with disabilities, ideally at some point we would be able to educate our elected officials on the issues that are facing us so that we don't have to be the ones who are constantly going up and doing it.
So I think this is an issue that we had that was brought up with going back to our young trustee elections, Brian Burr, who I think, or maybe it wasn't here, but he spoke to another group that I heard him at, and the issue was that his big platform was that I will take your voice and bring it, and that was it. But he never really went into his personal standing, or like that he never mentioned that he would commit to some issue personally, right? So I think maybe it's a little similar. Is that that's a little similar to what you're saying?
And I think on that point, I do know that Liv has talked to Claire Gibbs about this as well. So I think it's so like as you know, there are issues that we have as an organization with representation of students with disabilities. And so the fact that she has also done some of that on her own, I think, speaks to how much she might know already about disability issues. And I don't know her personally, but I do know that she did reach out to Claire. Claire Gibbs. So she is another person who she uses a wheelchair, but she's obviously not a part of PDA. So she has concerns, I would think, related to disability on campus.
Oh, is she the one with the brown hair?
Yes.
There's a lot of people with brown hair on campus. I don't know.
Very specific, I know. And so do you want to take a preliminary vote? Just like back to Daisy? Liz?
How many do you guys vote for?
One, right? 3 candidates, ideally you should, or right now, I'll vote for as many.
Oh, okay. Well, right now, I'll vote for, how about say 2? At most.
Okay, that works well. Alright, can we do it again? Daisy?
So Brandon.
Daisy?
Okay, so we can vote twice.
Yes.
Sorry.
I'm just gonna save my vote then. Alright, Daisy's knocked out.
Okay, and then
Looks like no
Liv?
one's gonna vote for him.
Okay, so Liv and
So should we choose one? Is this the issue that we had last year? Like we were like indoors 2 and then we were like, wait a second.
Okay,
mean,
who's super into Sahil?
Who's super into something?
Yeah.
I mean like
Number one choice is Sahil.
I wouldn't say like super above Liv, but I was thinking like Sahil.
Whose number one choice is Liv? Okay, I think that wins by default.
Okay.
Unless you want, I was gonna say, why don't we have 2 people who are really into those people, like say why, and then we can vote from there. But if you're not really into her and I'm not, or into Sahil and I'm not also, then it sounds like Liv is gonna win.
Yeah.
Let's just say why they're really for Liv.
Yeah, that might be
Get
valuable.
3 votes.
It might change my mind too. So.
Yeah.
Someone who voted for Liv.
I mean, I think again, just to go back to that point about how much they already know, like at some point, like I'm just gonna be honest. At some point, you get fatigue with constantly having to be the one that's going up and speaking, and you just wish that somebody would be able to do it for you. And I think from that sense, that Liv would be the best person to do that. Again, because she's not just reached out to, she actually reached out to me, she reached out to Dixie, and she also reached out to Claire.
And I think that her reaching out to people that have more knowledge about certain issues is her also trying to expand her knowledge. And I think that like step is really, really important, and that she's already taken that step is really valuable as a candidate, at least in my opinion.
I mean, the Claire thing sounds great, but I'm a little dubious about the reaching out to Deepti thing right before the election. Did she reach out to you for like genuine curiosity, or because she like wanted to know what to say in preparation of coming here?
I completely understand your point, and I was thinking about this too. The way my takeaway, and I guess I also got really excited and shared about like everything that DD was doing. I was like, yeah, I want to talk about it. I think the main purpose of her calling me was saying, hey, I want to put this revolving door fund for accessibility on my platform. What are your thoughts? That was her initial purpose.
So she had a really specific question that she wanted you to weigh in on. It wasn't like what did the DDA exec need to hear?
No.
Okay.
So I think
Okay, but then she did also hear all the other things that we're working on, right?
Yeah, but that I feel like I should take credit, or like liability for that. I was. Like,
you were the one who told her all of those
Yeah.
Because when she reached out to me, she said she already had an idea. She didn't say what it was, but she was like, can I get some more feedback on this? And then I was like, I don't really know because I'm not on DD's exec board. So I think she definitely did have that idea going in.
Okay. But in terms of like her talking about the nuances of disability and the issues faced by disability well, like I'm really glad that she can do that, but also it sounds like it might have been a little bit informed by like having conversations with people leading up to this election. Is that true, or is that not nuanced enough, or is it just false?
That's something I was trying to like listen in for, like will she say things that like I feel she knows because she talked to me right now. And I don't know, I guess since Kim, like I think all of them kind of tried to, they spent more time talking about their platform in general and where they came from. But yeah, I think like when she was talking here, she really talked about like what's it called? The revolving door and yeah, not I guess accessibility training for faculty. I'm not. How much did she say on that? I'm not really sure. But
She didn't have that until I said it.
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Right? That was the question. Like she said, she wanted racial and gender sensitivity trainings, and I said, would you also consider, you know, as a sort of like, I don't know. Was I not supposed to do that?
No, I think I'm glad you did.
It's definitely good
Here's
to
another
educate
idea.
people while we have the opportunity.
Right.
Yeah, I mean yeah.
Okay, so that's good because that I was like I didn't give that to her. Yeah.
That came up.
Again, I'm not against Liv, and I think her reaching out, even if it's for the election, is valuable because she like knows more.
Yeah.
And that's great, but like I do think, did anyone talk to Daisy beforehand?
No.
Okay, and I think Daisy like knew what was up with DDA beforehand. Like
She
reached out to
knew about our
us.
working group meeting somehow.
Yeah, how did she know about
People
that?
state.
She must have known about it through someone at People State. But like she also knew about the center, and she knew about like different accessibility concerns like beyond. So like
So that's
she also had a very nuanced understanding of it too.
So beyond the center, what exactly did she mention?
Can you reference some notes?
Let me see what I typed. She's been talking with Ivan, and making sure that he's been working, not making sure, but like the way she phrased it was I've been ensuring that there's been someone in DSG working with DDA on accessibility issues. Or
Did she say any issues?
Huh?
Did she say any issues?
I didn't type any of them, so
Okay.
I didn't hear it.
I think she
No,
did.
I was listening to that. It was sort of like through Ivan, I know.
yeah. So maybe that's the worry, the same worry is coming up, is that will she just make it like, will she indirectly do this, like have us do the work, but like she'll facilitate it,
Yeah.
but. Cause like we don't wanna be the ones that have to step up every single time to speak with administration. It's not our job, I suppose. This is
I
harder.
do acknowledge and like what you said that Liv kind of reaching out right before the election was strategic on her part, and I guess me and my gullible self got a little swayed by that. But I do feel like reaching out strategically right before an election is still slightly better than not reaching out at all.
I don't disagree.
And I don't really think while she probably had some intention of getting her name like known a little bit in TVA, I don't think her full intention was just like swear. I think she actually really does care about the issue at hand.
The fact that she came in with like a specific question and not just like, oh, tell me what DA is up to, I think because it shows that fact. I think maybe it was probably a lapse on my fault or on my behalf for getting a little too carried away and being like, let me tell you everything. So
Alright, before we go out and sit on the ground again, we have 2 minutes, so we should like.
Okay, well, it sounds like everybody's pretty down with Liv, is that right? Raise your hand if you like Liv.
I'm okay with this.
Okay, Liv it is.
So,
When is the election?
Can someone write up a thing, like ASAP? Cause I wrote up the thing for Trey the last time,
Yeah.
and then when we went to submit it, the Chronicle had already closed its publishing of endorsements. So we need to make sure we make whatever timeline they have, so if we just do it sooner than later,
If the election is March 7th, that's soon.
it's Thursday.
I checked, the Chronicle published like the rules for DSG, like endorsement decisions, so yeah, it should.
Okay.
And then if somebody could write it up.
we wanna go over the action items really quick.
Yes.
I have the notes for indoor stuff up here. So, so we're still working on floor plans, so if anyone wants to help out with like annotating floor plans with accessible features, that'd be great. And then we're also trying to just reach out to more people about like how to do the tactile maps, and how to move forward with the technology in terms of also getting the computing power to do that. So I think one thing we did want to try and do is get a meeting with Chip from the collab, because I think she's going to be super helpful. So if anyone, I think Trent is already going to help us do that, but if anyone else knows Chip, maybe you can help because he hasn't been responding. Let's see what else. But yeah, the main thing is like, if you want to help out with any of those projects, and especially right now, the mapping features onto like PDF maps, that'd be super helpful. So
For the Culture Center, I forwarded this email to exec without context because that's my bad. But it was Helen Yang from People's State, and she was following up on what she told me in a meeting about wanting to set up a meeting between different groups who are looking to gain physical spaces for their for identity groups, and so I'll forward to that as well.
Also, Fern reached out to Elmer, one of the staff members of La Casa, and he sent her an article with about the formation, which she forwarded to me, which I will forward to exec.
Okay.
And she asked him about some of the challenges that students who were advocating for a cultural space faced, and he said that it caused a temporary split in Duke's Hispanic community because not all the students who identified as Hispanic were advocating for it at the time. The main student who was pushing for a space was not very transparent about his intentions / actions, and they didn't feel like they were being informed about what was happening. And the student didn't really consider what the community wanted or needed because he was focused on making it happen sooner rather than later. So, Fern, if you're still,
Where's that from?
that was Elmer, a staff member at La Casa, who Fern talked to.
Oh.
So when you guys have been discussing the community center with admin or with the working group, are you phrasing it as like a space that's just a space, or is it like the Center for Sexual and Gender Diversity with like staff and library?
We mentioned that it was going to be like multi-purpose, like it's going to be not just a hub for community, but also for a resource hub.
Okay.
So like this
Like
CSGD.
yeah.
That's
I
that.
can remember.
Yeah, so we mentioned resources, resources, programming, and cultural hub.
Yeah, programming, that's the other, I always forget programming.
Programming.
So, but we also said that it'll depend on what people in the survey say, because we asked them what they would use the space for.
Can you
think that'll
send that
solve the
survey
problem
to the health
That
and
like
Betty's
we're
lab
not
because
transparent and
they're
we're not
trying to
responding to
get
what
something
community
to
members want, cause
and
we
that
have,
they see
now we're going through survey
DEA
data,
and
so
being like,
this will
And we have
hopefully,
survey data from
I don't
last
know,
week.
sort
yeah,
of
so like
similar,
I think we're
pushing for a
doing better
similar
than
thing.
Clubhouse.
We can send it,
I mean,
So
they have
they-
to create their own,
Right, oh, okay,
because ours is for only the 800 people registered with SDAO, and
oh,
not more broadly yet, SCU.
cause yeah, if we could get beyond that, there's a lot of interest, like just for people that are intellectually interested in like disability,
Sure,
you know.
yeah, I think that's another angle.
Yeah,
But I think Lee and Riddell specifically wanted to hear about the community of people who have disabilities, what do they want?
well, the people who have documented disabilities.
yeah,
Correct.
Yeah, well, I think the survey right now is a starting point, once we have
Yeah.
that feedback, then we can go
Then
forward.
it's more feedback after that, okay.
So also, do we know how much feedback we've gotten on the survey?
No,
Does anyone have
I think we
access?
should email Lee.
Okay, cause.
oh, I thought you guys were getting those.
Cause who made the survey?
I think Maddie.
Yeah,
Okay.
oh, wait, you were the one who made the Google form,
It's a Google form?
so you have the results.
It's in the drive.
Or
Oh, we
do
have
you-
a
It's
hundred.
our drive.
We have 101 responses.
We all,
Oh, we haven't even.
Oh my god.
Aren't they waiting? Aren't they waiting to get in here?
Yeah, we should probably go, guys.
Wait,
We're
guys.
like 3 minutes over.
Before we leave?
4 quick things. Sounds like a lot, but I promise it's not. The date. I've been talking to Steph with the person from Body Banter. The date for the panel has been set. It will be on Thursday, March 21st. If
right
any of you, yeah, and if any of you guys want to speak and you have a disability, that'd be awesome. Alexander who's leading the Max Program Task Force reached out and he said that he got like a domain name. So if anybody wants to get involved in building the website, please let him know. I gave him the contact information of all the people who want to be in that task force, and I think he said he'll reach out during spring break. And as you guys probably saw in the recap email, there was a LDOC accommodations survey that we sent out. I was thinking of sending it to my friend Sonia, who's the VP of Campus Life, to put on the DSG blast. Does that sound good for all of you? And also the Serena, who came from the LDOC committee.
Yeah.
And then last thing, would you guys be interested in having like a meal or like a lunch
Yes.
or a dinner after spring break? Because I feel like we do a lot of work together, but we haven't really had the time to bond. So.
We keep talking about community, but like,
Yeah.
don't
and that's like
our
be
own
a community, yeah.
So this will be open to the general body, not just execs then?
Oh yeah, of course.
Let me know if you feel like having a faculty member there would kill the vibe or be
No.
good, so, cause I don't have to go, but I might be able to.
Okay, but you're not like the faculty member is like that like one political science professor who like sits around and like theorizes about like blah 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 all day. But you're like hip and like cool
Hip and cool.
and like do awesome work too.
But you're gonna end up-
Yeah.
So a very different vibe.
Thank you guys so much for staying longer.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Sure thing. So